Hey there, this is Katherine. I am sharing a card kit from Hero Arts. This is Make It Yourself at Home. This is a card kit that they have put out at joann.com. It's available only on their website and nowhere else. And I have been doing these kits for a few months and have loved them. They've been a lot of fun. They seem to be older stamp sets, but they are new to me. They are stamp sets from Hero Arts that I do not have in my collection. And I particularly loved this one with the earth and the flowers on there. So you get a stamp set, you get a die. It doesn't coordinate with that stamp set, but it works together. And then there's that beautiful background. They also include 12 pieces, half pieces of full-size cardstock. There are these watercolor brushes, these little mini watercolor brushes, which are new to me, which I think would be good for coloring some of the tiny elements on that stamp. And then there are also 4 ink cubes in here. 3 of them are the Hero Arts Reactive ink, which I enjoy a lot. We've got a blue and pink and green, and I will just swatch those out so you can see the beautiful colors. That is Splash. This one's going to be Taffy. And then the last one is Green Apple. They also include this Contour ink, which is a newer ink line, color, I should say, to their ink line. It's great for no line coloring if you enjoy that. I'm going to do a little bit of that on one of these panels for the card. So there are your inks. And let's get started. I'm going to make a couple of cards, and then I'm going to show you a couple that I made off camera. But I'm going to begin by stamping out this large stamp using my stamp positioner. I'm going to stamp, this is how I like to start projects like this. It's just to go ahead and stamp a bunch of different panels. It can be on different paper. This one is a Copic paper that I'm using and some Gina K amalgam ink in black obsidian, my favorite one that I use. And then I'm also going to stamp these onto some watercolor cardstock. Since these are reactive inks, I want to be able to put some water to them and do sort of some watercoloring with them. All right, so I'm going to get this as the watercolor panel. So this is, a little bit thicker card. I'm going to stamp this a couple of times to make sure I get a nice ink into the fibers of this cardstock. And I'm going to do a couple of those, and then I'll be able to use those. And then I'm also going to stamp one in the contour ink. I cleaned off my stamp in between, and that contour ink is that kind of lighter gray color. It would be very pretty on its own. And so I'm going to stamp one of these panels as well with that color. And I'm going to start by finishing inking up that, and then I will start coloring with this. So I'm just going to pull out a couple of blocks, my glasses so I can see, my magnifying glasses so I can see these smaller images, and then I'm going to start squishing these inks onto a couple of blocks. I've got a little Distress spray bottle that I like to keep at hand to apply water to different projects. And then I have a water pen here. I don't know what brand it is. I've had it a long time. I think there may have been 2 or 3 in a set. I've got a couple of different ones with different nibs on there. This one's a pretty thin, pointy one, and it's great for a lot of details like this. I do have some regular paint brushes. I'm going to use one later, but these are great for applying color like this. I keep a little chamois. You'll see up in that top left corner, that light blue chamois. I keep that to kind of help control my water flow. When you use a water pen like this, sometimes you can get too much water out of there. So I keep that close. So if I find that my color's getting too diluted, it's great also to change colors. So I like to use that when I'm watercoloring because I can just rinse my cloth off. So I'm just going to take some time here going back and forth, filling in my spots, starting with the blue and then moving to the green, and I'll have to come back to the blue and all of that. I'm going to use the taffy color on the roses. They are so pretty. I'm so excited about them, but I am going to add a couple of colors from my stash. I'm going to use these Hero Arts colors that I also have One is going to be Lemon Drop, and the other one I think is Grape Splash. So I'm going to add a couple of colors in here in addition to what is included in the kit. And you could pull out any of your colors in addition to what is included in this set here. So I'm just going back in, finishing up the blue where I missed a little bit of it, and then I can start to move on to my pink color. I love to watercolor. It's probably my second favorite technique because it's so forgiving and it's just a lot of fun. You don't have to really think too hard about it. You can be as detailed as you want with it, and if you make a mistake, you really just kind of can keep going with it. It's usually not detrimental to your project where you have to start over like that right there. There's a perfect example right there. I'm dripping, wasn't paying attention, my paintbrush dripped all over the place, so I just quickly wiped it off with my cloth, and I hope for the best. Okay, so let me get those flowers finished, and then I'm going to come back in and work on some of my greens. Here we've got these little delicate green leaves here, and then I'm going to use that yellow that I referenced. I really wanted to include that when I saw this image. I thought that would be pretty against that pink color. And it's pretty dry. My project is pretty dry. I'm not soaking it too much. This paintbrush kind of pen lets me control a good bit of the water. And it's Grape Slush. I don't remember what I said. So Grape Slush is the other color. And then this is the Lemon Drop in that yellow. And again, you could use whatever yellow you have. You don't have to have a reactive ink, a watercolor here. The image is pretty small. I don't think it would be impossible to use dye ink. Sometimes dye ink does not work well in certain applications because it just doesn't react to water. But when you're doing a small image like this, you can get away with a dye ink on a lot of projects, I have found over time. If you're doing something larger, it may cause problems with wetting your paper too much to kind of get the saturation you want. But I have found that you can use a lot of different dye inks for different projects. And I'm taking that little tiny watercolor brush, and you can see that I have gone and added those little pops of purple. The last thing I'm going to do here is come back with a little bit of green over those kind of twigs. They just looked a little bare. And then I'm going to finish up a couple of these purple ones that I missed. And there we go. So pretty. Okay, so let that dry well. But off camera, this is the one that I stamped in the black ink. Same paper, same inks, same brush, all the same. Look how different they look. Isn't that amazing? So that contour ink is on the right, that much softer. It looks completely different. I couldn't believe it when I finished. And I pulled it out. I thought, these look so different, yet so beautiful. So the ink just helps, I guess, play tricks on your eyes and really soften up your image. All right, so I'll come back to those two panels in a bit with finished cards on that. I'm going to move on here to a shaker card. I have gone ahead and taken some of this green cardstock, cut it in half, trimmed it down a little bit so I have a border on each side. And then I'm going to turn this into a shaker card. I've got some acetate sheets here. These are 6x6, and I will cut one of these down to create my window. There are a ton of ways to do shaker cards. This is just the way that I like to make these kind of shaker cards that have the cut in where it cuts into the paper and it stays. I just find this is a pretty easy way. But again, there are a ton of ways to make shaker cards. This is just the way I like to do it. You could absolutely use a dry adhesive here. You don't have to use a liquid. I'm just using a liquid because it was what was on my table. And I'm not really sure, honestly, where my dry adhesive is. It tends to wander around my craft area. So I had my liquid glue handy. You can see now that that has dried, and I'm going to work on adding some foam adhesive all over. I'm just going to take a few minutes here cutting this down, building my image, and then I'm going to apply the adhesive, at the top and the bottom. So I've got pretty much, except for the center, the whole card is popped up nicely, so it should float and be pretty on my card base. and give me that lift that I want. So I'm just making sure that all these little spots are closed, because I'm using some very small sequins and some little tiny hearts that are very delicate. So I'm going to try my best to keep everything in there. You can see I've got a bunch of adhesive on there. I'm just kind of laying where I want it to go. I'm going to use my anti-static tool before. I like to apply that to my acetate sheet, and then I'm going to put the tiniest little dot in the middle to give me a reference of where I want to pile my stuff in the middle, and it will be covered by all of these little shaker bits. So I'm just pulling out some random things from my craft stash, seeing what works. I had these little gemstones, but I decided they were too thick and they probably would not shake. So I decided against them, and then I'm going to add these sequins in here, and I've got these kind of little stones, shaker pieces, something like that, these little blue ones. So I'm just going to make a nice little collection of items here, and then I'm going to peel all this adhesive off on that foam tape, and I will come back and pop this all up on there. And you can press hard right away to make sure that all of my edges are adhered before I start shaking. I've done that before where I forgot to peel a piece of the adhesive tape off, and I started shaking, and a third of it shook out the side because I had missed one of the pieces of tape. So just be careful when you're applying your foam adhesive, and don't get too excited until you're sure you've got a good seal on your project. I've got this this old banner punch from Stampin' Up! In my stash that I use quite often. I just stamped one of the images from the stamp set onto a piece of scrap white paper. I'm going to trim that down, and then I will just add this to my card. And that will be pretty much it. I'm going to add one more little detail on it, but I'm going to keep this pretty simple and let that beautiful center of sequin shaker goodness be the star of this card. And I will add all of this onto a white card base. All the other cardstock that I use is just going to be what's included in the kit, but I am going to add a white card base here. I do have a Nuvo shimmer pen that I'm going to come back with. No, I'm sorry, this is Wink of Stella. I've been using Nuvo as well. This is Wink of Stella. This is just a clear pen that has a little bit of shimmer on it, and I am just going to cover over some of the green center parts to highlight with that shimmer part that is included, and I will add that to a card base as well to finish it off. All right, I'm going to move on here. I'm going to heat emboss this background with white embossing powder, and then I am going to put some ink over that after I emboss it. It's a little hard to see adding the white powder on there. You can see it when I apply it. You can see the reflection on there. And then I will take my heat tool to that. I'm using some Ranger white embossing powder here and just getting a good coverage. You can see a little bit of that when I turn it to the side. And then I'm going to heat up my heat tool nice and warm, get it hot, and then you'll be able to see it turn just a little bit. I leave these parts in because some people have never seen heat embossing, and that's my favorite technique. So I always like to make sure that people can see it in case they're not familiar with that technique. And so I'm just going to heat this up. It's going to take just a few minutes here and get it going and get the shine. You'll start to see it build a little bit. And then after that, I'll come back with my inks, and we'll use a little bit more of the water. Now, I began this with a blending brush, but then I decided that I just wanted to use a paintbrush because I could move that ink faster, and so it would go a little bit quicker if I could just use my big paintbrush. So I dug it out, and I'm using my little collapsible water cup here to get my brush cleaned and have plenty of water there. And again, just smushing everything onto my block so I can add this to my card panel. And you can see how that pops right out. It's so pretty. I love the resist of embossing and then putting either ink or water, a watercolor or something like that over the top, and then it just pops out. So I'll let that dry. It's going to take a bit, and while that is drying, I am going to color this little bouquet of balloons and this little kitty. This both of these stamps and the dies are from a My Monthly Hero kit. I believe it was June 2021 that this kit was sold, and it is still available. I looked in the shop of Hero Arts, and it is still there. It has become one of my favorite sets that I have. I particularly love the bouquet of balloons. It's just so much fun, and that little kitty is adorable. So I'm just taking a second here and coloring my balloons. I don't really have a pattern. I'm going to use the pink. I'm going to use that taffy, the splash color, and then I am going to also pull in a little bit of that yellow, that lemon drop that I used for the kitty. I thought about using the green, but I decided that I wanted to use the yellow because I knew the kitty was going to be on that card as well. And I had so much green from the background that I didn't want to overpower the card. So I'm just taking a second here, moving on to the blue, and again, not spending too much time on it. I love the way that the watercolor ends up looking when it dries, and so you don't really have to do a lot of shading. You could, if you wanted to, you could go back over, let it dry for a second, and then go back over. And I'm just going to clean my brush there, and then I'm going to add the yellow part here. The last little bit will be to color the tiny little bits on the bottom of this balloon bouquet. And then I can die cut and assemble this card. So let me clean that off, and then I'll make sure I have the right color on the bottom, the pink, and then the blue to finish that off. And you'll want to let these pieces dry. That panel that I did was pretty wet. If you're in a hurry, you could use a heat tool to dry it. Okay, so I'm going to start layering this together. This hello there is from another Hero Arts stamp and die set that has this beautiful hello there, and then there's some accompanying sentiments. I'm not going to be using those on this card, just that word die. So I'm going to add foam to all of these pieces, and I'm just taking a second here to try and get everything where I want it to go. And I have already mounted this onto a pink card base. So hello there, and all the cardstock, like I said, is included in the kit, especially that blue hello there. That's one of the card panels included. So it all just ties together beautifully. And I'm going to let that little kitty hold on to that balloon that they are sharing with someone else. And that is it on that card. Super cute. Okay, so let's review. Here's the shaker card I made. And then I have these two. I went ahead and just did a really quick stamp. I picked one of the stamps from each of them. I used these infinity rectangle dies to cut them out, and then I layered on some of that cardstock from the kit. And then that last card again is the hello there with that sweet little kitty and that embossed and watercolored background. So I hope you enjoyed this set. I had a blast with it. Be sure to check these out. They're at joanne.com from Hero Arts. Leave me a comment. Let me know if you had a favorite. And thanks so much for watching. And don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.